All right, hello everyone. We are here today to go over responding to negative players. So give it just a minute or so to see if we get anyone to jump on this afternoon. All right. All right, perfect. So we'll go ahead and get started. It is Sunday afternoon, so we are trying out just a couple of different days to bring some of these sessions over to all of you. So again, we'll be going over responding to negative players, always starting with a nice little quote. I am not a product of my circumstances. I am a product of my decisions. That is by Stephen Covey. All right, so today what we're going to go over is why addressing negativity matters, identifying different types of negative players, strategies for de-escalating conflicts, turning negativity into constructive engagement, best practices for maintaining a supportive environment and atmosphere, and closing thoughts, takeaways, and then of course any Q&As at the end as well. So why addressing negativity matters? Negativity impacts the experience for players, directors, and spectators. It can create tension, reduces participation. Addressing it properly leads to a more enjoyable and professional atmosphere. So an example here, based off of just some data that was kind of collected online, a little bit of tidbits that we've seen throughout, what players say about tournaments, events, and feedback that has been provided for directors as well. So a quick example, during a recent tournament, a disagreement over a ruling escalated into a physical altercation between players, which in turn disrupted the event and casted a very big negative light on the cornhole community for this specific club. The resolution was implementing a clear conflict resolution, ensuring that all participants were aware of the player code of conduct, and then finding ways to prevent those types of altercations in the future. So definitely one of those things for this particular example, the tournament director was really trying to figure out, what it is that they needed to do, what are the, options that they have, and kind of creating some type of a clear, cut and dry, item to provide to their players. So one of the things that this director did was they also created a club code of conduct as well that went in unison with the ACL's player code of conduct, which essentially said, hey, if X, Y, and Z happens or after so many times, at least that way players had the expectations to know if they get any altercation, if there's any type of, name calling, yelling, whatever the case may be, as long as it's super negative, then they had what was going to happen. They presented it to all of their club members, players, just so that way there is at least something that provided that group some type of resolution to that conflict. And it also sets really good expectations as well. So always finding some type of way to, formulate that, either creating some additional rules for your club, or just kind of having those conversations and building those relationships with the players as well. So identifying different types of negative people. So I think every single director has ran into a couple of these. There's always the complainer, the aggressor, rule blender, and the poor sport. The complainer, typically one of those players who are constantly just dissatisfied. They're very vocal, if not in person, sometimes via social media. The aggressor, just someone who constantly gets argumentative, maybe it's a little bit more disruptive than most other players. A rule bender. There's always someone who likes to challenge the rule, find some type of a loophole, causes disputes, things like that. Poor sport, blames others, refuses to accept, or loses gracefully. Michelle, perfect. Hi, Michelle. Awesome. Look forward to you rewatching it on Monday. So an example of the complainer. Complainer is a player who, again, voices their dissatisfaction about the tournament. In this particular example, it came down to the tournament scheduling, the venue conditions. And this particular player would often disrupt some type of, meetings or always post something negative about the events that this director would run. One of the resolutions was that the league itself and that particular club did establish a feedback system. So they allowed players to submit their concerns formally. This approach allowed all voices were heard without derailing meetings. One of the good ways to do this is creating a Google form. Make it set up where maybe you don't need to have the email, maybe you don't require a name, but kind of keep it to where you can at least receive some type of feedback without the players thinking that there's going to be some type of negativity from the director because of their honest feedback. So always finding some type of way that you can at least say, hey, you know what, we do want to hear it. We want the information. We want to create a better experience for everyone and the players. And sometimes there could be an idea that a player might have that you hadn't considered, or maybe a perspective that wasn't considered either when creating some of the events, schedules, things like that. The aggressor. This particular example that we have was very publicly posted throughout Facebook. So it was during a high-stakes match. A player became confrontational with an opponent, as well as the officials, which led to a tense environment. The player themselves, for the resolution, was provided a formal warning and was prompted to have a conversation at another time to allow the emotions to ease. We also, as a league, emphasize a zero tolerance policy for, aggressive behavior as well. So it is really good, again, just having some of those, formal either types of warning for your club, for your area, for your state, whatever it is that's going to work that, works for everyone, is fair, provides some type of structure of, warnings, or at least having a conversation. A really, really good part of the resolution as well is also waiting maybe a day or so later and say, hey, you know what? I know that you're upset right now. This is what we're going to do in this moment, but let's talk about it afterwards as well. Let's figure out what led to, that conversation from happening, and trying to do it with a clear mindset and a clear head. This also provides that player to either reflect on their behavior or provide better insight as to what had happened. It also allows the director to also kind of get a little bit of, ease for themselves as well. Figure out, okay, in the future, this is what we need. Hey, maybe we need to have this conversation with all of our players that, we don't either, act a certain way, or this is what could lead to X, Y, and Z. Again, all directors know their players best and know what works to kind of keep everything fun, because cornhole should be a place of, having fun, having some competitiveness, but also coming together and creating some type of environment is good for players, directors, the venue. So just making sure that we're taking everyone into account. The rule bender. This one is always a fun one. An example, a participant frequently exploited a loophole in game rules, causing disputes and frustration among peers. Essentially, this was at a league that a director had been running, and they had very specific sort of rules that were, I guess there were a lot of loopholes in it. So what the club did was they revised and made everything incredibly clear to ensure fair play. This led to more specific details for that club, including PPR caps, AB players, and encouraged more players to attend. One of the specific rules that it came down to was this particular club had a PPR cap in order for them to create their upper and their lower divisions. One of the issues that they were running into was that some of the players that were involved in the league didn't have enough statistical data in order for them to be placed in the proper, area. It was under the assumption that they belonged in, a lower area, but then come to find out they probably were better suited for the uppers. So what they did was they created additional rules that said, hey, you have to have at least X amount of games in order for you to be allowed to play in the lower division. If you don't have at least X amount of games, then you're required to play in the uppers division with everyone else because there was no data. And again, that's no case-by-case basis. Again, your players, your area, your player pool. But in this particular circumstance, it did come down to a PPR cap that a player was able to find loopholes because they were able to, not play as often or, anything like that with this particular with ACL points and not being able to have enough of a PPR base to really place them in the correct division. So that was one of the things where the club themselves just made a revision, made clarifications, and went a little bit more in depth in their rules in order to kind of help it for all of the players as a whole and for the club as a whole. Poor sport. So typically with some of these players, which I think a lot of us have witnessed this, poor sport after losses. Sometimes a player will publicly blame teammates, questions, the directors, the referee's decisions. And, sometimes it creates such a nuisance that it starts affecting that team, sometimes the person that they're playing with, and even players in the area, their morale. There's always a handful of players who just don't have great sportsmanship. Sometimes they get frustrated. They're throwing their bags everywhere. They're getting their hat, throwing it across the room. Sometimes you have a brand new player where it's their first time, first experience, and then that's kind of what they're witnessing. Or there's consistent players who, potentially just have this type of attitude that you're trying to figure out, okay, well, what do I do? Is it in the best interest of our club to have someone who is just constantly just getting upset after every single game that other players now either don't want to get partnered up with them, or it's just kind of causing an issue when players just don't want to show up at all because they see this player is registered. This particular instance, there was a club as well who was having the exact same issues. It was a very consistent group of about 2 to 3 players. They would come in, they were very, very good players, excellent players, very high caliber, could play really well, played for a very long time, but they were constantly, getting upset like, oh man, this is who I drew. Oh, this is what we're doing. Well, of course you're going to miss the board. Of course you're going to throw the bag short. So it started becoming a little bit of an issue with this, with these 3 players that they had at their club. Essentially what the resolution was after, the director asked for some feedback was just having a conversation with those players. They were counseled on their sportsmanship values. They talked about, doing some team building discussions like, hey, you're a really good player. You can give some insight. Maybe you can help them out a little bit. You're someone that everyone is looking to. So just kind of making it some type of a collaboration with these players in order for them to feel a little bit more involved, but also to understand that people look to them as a mentor as well. Now, this player in question did not realize the behaviors that they were demonstrating. And that they were causing a morale issue for the teammates around them. And it also provided that player with a lot of self-reflection. Now, fast forward a few months later from this particular incident, the player is now someone who actively engages in the community, has become a pretty big member of that particular club's area, who's constantly bringing players in, and coincidentally also talks about sportsmanship. So that's always been, really, really good to see that progression of, sometimes I don't know what I'm doing until someone brings it up to me, like a player, they don't realize that their actions or maybe things that they say, have such a great impact. And words and actions do have a very big impact in any sport, with our sport included as well. So just trying to kind of give some of those reminders and positive reinforcement and encouraging players as well. Strategies for de-escalating conflicts. This is a big one that we get a lot of questions about, especially at some of the larger events, opens, things like that. We do see a lot of different personality types, a lot of different, mentalities. And then, of course, we have other things, in the mix as well with high competitive atmosphere and energy. One of the biggest things that we always strongly encourage is, staying calm. Don't react emotionally, always remain professional. The players typically upset at themselves, the situation, or the opposing party. But as they come to you for that direction in order to talk about it, they are going to be very high intensity. They're going to be upset. They might yell. They might, say some choice words. So just staying there, staying calm, and trying not to react too emotionally, understanding that their frustration is with themselves, the situation, not so much as you directly. Acknowledge their concerns. So listen to everything that they say. Once they finally, calm down a little bit, show that you hear them, but also maintain control. Say, hey, you know what, okay, just to reaffirm what you said, or just to acknowledge what you said, I want to make sure I heard it correctly. What you're saying is this happened, that led to this, and then this is the result. And then trying to just make sure that they know that you heard everything that they said, but also making sure that you're picking out the most important pieces to try to, keep emotions down, but also understand yourself, so you can figure out what it is that needs to happen. Set clear expectations, reinforce the rules, the standards. So make sure and say, hey, okay, so I see that you're emotional from this. This is what happened. Let's look at the rules. This is what the rules say. This is the typical standard. Do you need a minute to walk out and just take a second to kind of come back to, and then redirect the focus? Because ultimately, redirecting the players to say, hey, you still have a few more games left. Or, hey, this is what happened. What can we do in the future? What are some things that we can learn from this? So just encourage them to channel those frustrations into either improving their game or kind of improving maybe their sportsmanship in the game. One of the examples that we have here is a player was very upset over a director's ruling and began arguing loudly during a match. They were interrupting the match. They started pacing. They started walking into another player's box. It just became this whole, situation where then, people who are watching, their friends play, they're starting to get upset. Then both sides are getting upset. You have players trying to play. You have outside forces coming in, and it's just a ton of people frustrated and trying to bring them all back. What the director did was they calmly intervened. They acknowledged the player's frustration, reiterated the rules, encouraged both players to just focus on the upcoming games, and then they were able to de-escalate the situation. Now, the decision for this was made for that director to continue monitoring the rest of that match and the players' upcoming match, especially if those two were to meet again in the bracket. So just things like that, trying to remember, to stay calm and fully acknowledging what's going on. Because if you repeat exactly what they say to an extent, then they understand that you know exactly what it is, and then you can provide the best resolution, for everyone involved. Turning negativity into constructive engagement. So this one, again, kind of goes into all of it. So encouraging communication, we want players to be able to express all of their concerns, but we also want it to be in a structured way, a meaningful way, and, to make sure that it's, there's a resolution that can happen at the end. Promote sportsmanship. So reward and recognize positive behavior. Provide anything that provides positive reinforcement, anything that you can do with that. And then, of course, providing solutions, offer guidance on how they can improve their experience. Maybe sometimes as directors, we also need guidance on how to improve the experience that we provide to players. Sometimes we don't know that, decisions that we make, might negatively impact a player or an experience. And so getting that feedback and being able to take the feedback is huge, as well as a director. So for example, a group of players had been expressing their dissatisfaction with a club's scheduling, which led to a lot of public complaints. I'm sure as directors, it's hard. There's not one size fits all. Every area is different. Every club is different. Player bases are so different. And scheduling tournaments, you've got to really find a way to schedule it based off of your venue. Are there restrictions? There's so many things that go into making those decisions that players don't often see. So the resolution for this is encouraging communication. This particular league in this situation took it upon themselves to do a live stream. They said, look, everybody, come on, I'm going live. Ask your questions. Let's figure this out. They provided a platform for players to voice their concerns, let them suggest improvements, and then the director provided clarifications for why the decisions were made. In turn with, hey, you know what? This is what I thought was going to work. These were the load-in times that I had. This was the time that we had to leave by. This is the reason why the schedule was what it was. So they provided, the board to player ratio, the timing, why some of the events were at the same time, which made a couple of folks upset who wanted to play in multiple. So being able to kind of encourage the communication and say, hey, you know what, maybe this time we missed a beat, but this is what was available to us and the decisions that had to get made. But I've made notes to improve that for future events. This director also introduced a Player of the Month award. This specific one, though, was to, recognize individuals who had positive behavior and teamwork, who are saying, hey, you know what? I'm talking to some members of our cornhole community. This is sort of what they're saying. Is there something that we can do, to add in a round robin? Can we add more games for the amount that we're paying? Can we pay less? Trying to find ways to meet in the middle, but also trying to, ensure that, that director was also recognizing people who were voicing their opinions, but also saying to them, hey, thank you for voicing your opinion. I'm going to also, recognize you because it was a positive opinion. It helped me grow. It helped you grow. And then it ultimately helps the club itself. Provide solutions, same thing. Collaborate with players to adjust schedules, accommodating the majority preferences, demonstrating that you're being responsive, as well as providing players an opportunity to, again, understand the difficulty that it is to accommodate some of the times that there's venue constraints and there's so much that's going on at a lot of these events. So just making sure that we're also being mindful and recognizing that, a player might say something in frustration or anger, but typically because they don't understand or they don't know what the reasons are. A lot of these players, they get to come in, they get to play, enjoy themselves, but they don't understand the back end when it comes to scheduling these venues, doing things like that. So as directors, we also have to be mindful that it's not that they're trying to be cruel, but that they're trying to understand. So providing some level of understanding, resolutions, and just having conversations, asking players, did you like this venue? Did you like this event? What are some things that you would like to see? Are there things that maybe we're missing the mark on? Or is there something, that you just think we should try? And then thinking about it, actually sit down and think about it. Would this work? Wouldn't it work? And then say, hey, we're provided some feedback. These 2 bits of feedback, as fun as they sound, they're just not going to work for this type of event or for this day. However, that doesn't mean we can't do it on a local night or on an, off-site event or anything like that. So just making sure that you're letting the players know that you hear them, you understand them, and are willing to work with them, but also providing a little bit of feedback back to them to say, hey, we're trying our best, but there's also, other things that we have to consider as well. So best practices for maintaining a supportive atmosphere, be transparent. Transparency is key. This is going to help you in the long run. Lead by example. Directors and top players always set the tone. If you come in and you say, hey, everyone, let's go. We're going to have fun. This is what we're doing. Let them know what they're doing, what they're playing for, what the percentage is, and just say it with a high energy. Say, hey, welcome today. We're here. We're going to play a 4-game round robin. After the round robin, we're going to do a game of knockout. Once knockout's complete, we're going to seed the bracket based off of, whatever parameters you pick. We're going to have a great night. Make sure, have fun, enjoy it. And then that's it. Things like that, by showing some type of positivity, bringing a little bit of energy, as opposed to, hey guys, we're going to do 4-game round robin, double elimination. Let's get started. Changes the tone. So just bring up, some kind of energy, lead by example, show, other directors in your community, show players in your community that you're happy or excited. You want them to be there. So giving them some type of, positivity and leading by that example to show them that. Implement a code of conduct with clear consequences. I think this is incredibly important. Working with your fellow directors in your area, talking to them and say, hey, this is a type of behavior that none of us really want to have happen at any of our clubs. How can we work together to come up with some type of a, code of conduct? We do have, the player code of conduct that we use at all of our events and, ACL standards, but sometimes you also need a little bit of something at your local league. Again, your players, everyone who walks in the door, your venue's expectations, and then your own personal expectations as well. So even finding something where you do implement something so people know walking in, hey, I can't come in here and, throw, my beer on someone and say, that's okay. They'll be fine with it. Giving some type of, thoughts on what the players know that they can and can't do. Also helps a little bit, because as much as we like to say they should know, sometimes they don't know. Fostering a community by promoting team building activities. I think this one is a really fun one to do. I love team building activities. I love teams events. I think this is a huge way to bring players together from different types of, backgrounds. One of the things that I like is I like doing anything balanced. My favorite thing to do is a crew cup that's balanced, or a teams event of 6 players that's balanced. Typically what that looks like is you're going to have one advanced player, maybe one pro or an elite player, and then a comp and an intermediate. Split them however you want, but this provides the ability for everyone to kind of play with each other, feel like they all have the ability to also, either win together as a team. And it brings so many people together who wouldn't typically talk to each other, to learn who their neighbors are, to really, maybe even meet new friends. I think that, building some type of team building activity in what you do at some events, or even just something fun, really, really fosters, creating that supportive atmosphere. And the more that, different folks talk to each other, maybe someone who has a better understanding of, what your club does talks to someone new who they wouldn't talk to, and they say, hey, this is what we do. These are the fun things that we like to do. This is what, so-and-so might, yell and say, great job, you're amazing, from across the room. And, someone might not like it, but someone might say, hey, that's how he is. And just, learning who each other is as well at these events are really good for players also. Encouraging peer accountability. So players also holding each other to a higher standard. I know for myself, I definitely try to do my best in holding myself to a higher standard from what I would typically do as a director, making sure that I am doing everything that I can to, be someone that, others, either look to or at least feel encouraged that they could ask a question or, seek advice or anything like that. Same thing goes with, encouraging peers to do the same. Having, players say, man, I don't really know what kind of bag I should use for this, or, the boards are really sticky today, or they're really fast, what would you do? Kind of encouraging those peers to ask each other questions, which then builds your community, which then, grows it into a supportive atmosphere. So kind of, having everyone help each other out is also really important to do as well. All right. Closing thoughts and takeaways. So handling negativity effectively strengthens the community. I think as long as everyone's encouraged to talk to each other, they feel safe to talk to you or to someone else, it really strengthens the community. One of the things that I like to tell a lot of players is, I do not know until I know. Sometimes we don't see everything that's going on at all times. Sometimes we don't know what are these small little things going on within the community that we don't always get to be privy to, especially with different relationships and different groups and sometimes different silos. So trying to find a way to bridge through all those different cultures, all the different groups, and just, trying to make sure that, you're willing to also receive any level of feedback and understanding that it's not intended to be negative to you or to your club, but it's just some type of feedback. Any type of feedback is going to always help you grow and continue to, build a very strong community. Small changes lead to a better playing environment for everyone. Sometimes a little bit of the smallest bit of feedback can lead to a small change that can lead to a much greater, environment and impact for everyone. So just making sure that you are listening and figuring out ideas. A player might come up to you and say, hey, I know we do crazy cornhole on some nights. Maybe instead of you guys using skinny boards, we do more mini boards. And that could be the biggest change that ends up bringing in more people. Any small tweak to what you do can always lead to a better experience. And as you learn and you grow, just making sure that you're constantly changing things. You don't want everything to always stay the same. You want there to be some type of, something to get excited for. You don't want to run the exact same type of tournament all year long, every single week, day in, day out. You want to add something different, something exciting, and just something to kind of, build the culture a little bit and, make it not so, stagnant. It's going to help you in the long run for sure. So hopefully after all of that talking, it gave you a couple of ideas of, staying engaged, creating a positive culture, within the community and everything like that. So just, make sure that you're listening to your players, being receptive to feedback, you're willing to make small changes. Also, putting yourself out there, creating those bonds. Don't make yourself too unattainable to where players feel comfortable to be able to come up and talk to you, and then being able to build something together. Yep, so that was a lot. That was a lot of information there. I'm sure everyone here has, ran into some type of player who, maybe meets, if not one, but all of those. And I hope that a little bit of these tips and just, being able to have those conversations with players is going to help you. It will definitely help your club as well in the long run, and will also help you, be able to build up yourself to be able to have those hard conversations, and also being able to receive some of that feedback that you may or may not want to hear in the future. All right. Perfect. Right at about the 30-minute mark, so that's great. All right, so I don't see any questions that come in. Facebook. Okay, perfect. So if you have any questions or anything, or maybe you have a situation going on at your club and you want a little bit of feedback, always feel free to reach out. I'll be available to try to give some type of advice or some information, or at least think if there's another director who might have gone through the same situation with a player, or something going on at their club, making sure that being able to build those connections and kind of help each other out. But other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful and amazing Sunday. Those of you heading to Michigan, I will see some of you all out there. But other than that, I think we are golden. So thank you guys for coming in and listening. All of this will be recorded and will be in our YouTube library as well. All right. Bye, guys.